Oh, hi. Sorry, I was looking at my notes. I want to talk to you about your readings for this week. You're going to do a research log, and don't forget your research logs are about your support points. So, if I asked you to revise your thesis and support points assignment and resubmit, please get that done today. It's Sunday. Get that done because you always need more time to work on your research logs. All right? And a couple of you gave me really long lists of support points. Pare that down. Pare that down. Just pick out the most important issues. So let me just begin with reiterating what it is you're writing about. I don't want you to get lost. I want you to look at the question carefully because the question asks you to do an analytical essay. Analyze cause and effect. Analyze why. How and why some of the issues in the 19th century influenced the second wave of the women's movement in the 1960s. All right? That's what your focus is on. It's not a report on women. It's not an analysis of the readings. It's not that. It's not that. The Oxfam article gives you a lot of information about women, and it focuses on poverty, why women are, larger numbers of women are poor than men. That's what the article's about. That the article's about, here are the reasons why women have a hard time moving forward in societies. So it's a helpful article. It gives you a lot to think about. And that's why I gave it to you. I didn't give it to you so that you could just rely on it to give me your papers. Don't do that. You're supposed to cite from it, certainly, but don't use it solely to support your argument, whatever it turns out to be, okay? So, we're talking about issues that influenced the second wave. That's what we're talking about, all right? So, not a focus on today, although we still have issues, but we're not focusing on that today. We're focusing on what happened in the 19th century, what were the issues women were having then, and how did those influence the issues of the second wave? I think I've said that a million times in a different way, so I'm just going to move on. So it's an analysis. Remember that. How and why. Cause and effect. All right? The yellow wallpaper. I've given lots of lectures on this. I'm going to try to keep it short because it is a really interesting piece of work written by Charlotte Perkins Gilman in the 19th century about a nameless woman who is totally controlled by her husband. And the sister-in-law seems to help the husband. All right? Well, just that little tiny aspect alone is interesting because it indicates that the sister-in-law doesn't want to buck the system. She wants to help her brother because it would be advantageous to do so. You don't want to go against the man, okay? This nameless woman apparently also just had a baby, so it's probable that she's suffering from postpartum depression. And that's an interesting fact, but it's not part of this paper. It's not part of the paper. Only in the sense that if women's health was an issue in the 19th century, Charlotte Perkins Gilman's story emphasizes the poor attention that was being paid to women's health. All right. So I'm mentioning this because I don't want postpartum depression to be a centerpiece of your papers. Okay? Larger issues. When she was writing this, as you all know by now, because I've seen it in your thesis and support points, good work, by the way, you are mentioning the suffragette movement. That's very important because women did not have the vote and they started to rebel against that. They wanted equal rights. And one of the major things they needed was to have a vote in their government. They needed to be a part of making decisions on public policies that affected everybody and quite frankly, kept women unequal in many ways. So they wanted that voice. But that also is only part of the times. It's relevant, but it was only part of the issues. All right? So the yellow wallpaper is a representative piece. It's, in addition to being a horror story, it speaks to the plight of women who are struggling to survive in a male-dominated society. It's oppression. All right? It's a story about oppression. At the end of the story, this woman obviously is completely insane. What led to this insanity? Right? So the story is representative of the times. Just like there are stories that are representative of our times now. Okay? There are lots of stories and novels and books have been written about 9/11, about the Trump era, about Bernie Sanders, about the Me Too movement, about Black Lives Matter. There are lots of things that artists, writers, novelists, poets communicate to reflect their times, the issues of their times. That's what the yellow wallpaper is also. It's a piece that reflects the issues of women during those times. So at the end of the story, she's crawling around the floor, tearing off the last bits of the yellow wallpaper in the room, in which she's seen lots of other women. All right, so they're representing. And the husband breaks down the door and faints when he sees her. So you have to think, what is the author saying? Is this a wish? Is it an uplifting ending? She's crawling around the floor. She's fully mad. He faints in her path and she steps over him on the floor. He's an obstacle. He's still an obstacle. Okay? So it's not a happy story, but it certainly gives you ideas about what women were dealing with and how frustrating that was. All right? I think I went through this before, but I'll go through it again. I'll give you some of the issues, just some of them. You can use them. Voting was an issue, and it was an issue again in the 60s, but not in the same way. You research why. Employment, yep, but not the same employment issues. You research what they were. Wage equity. Be careful with that. Be careful with that because that might still be employment. All right? So large issues are not, you're not going to have a list of 10 or 12. You're going to have a theory. And an example theory that I've seen in your work is This and this were the major issues that were still existing in the 20th century. That's a really good theory. And then you give me a really good conversation about how and why the issues, those issues in the 19th century affected the same issues or outgrowths of those issues in the 1960s. All right? Okay. I have to do something about my hair, but not your problem. Okay, have a good week, folks, and don't forget, if you have to revise those theses and support points, get them to me today, okay? Because you need time to do the logs, which are due Friday before 11 p.m. Use your library. Your librarians are there to help you. Consult with them, all right? And it's not a bad idea to review those library orientations and brush up on your research skills every single week, okay? All right, see you next week.